Good afternoon, evening, or morning, whatever time of day it is where you are. Thank you for joining us. Today I am live with the Thunderous One. We will be discussing the Islamic claim that Adam was 90 feet tall or 30 meters tall, and people have been getting progressively shorter ever since. We'll look at that from a couple angles. We'll look at the kind of the biological claim, whether this is even physically possible, but we'll also look at how this relates to the difference between the Bible and the way the Bible explains things and the way Islam explains things. So let me start us with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you for the opportunity to connect with fellow believers and unbelievers around the world. We ask that anyone listening today, whether they are a Christian, a Muslim, or otherwise, approach the material with an open mind, that they not simply dismiss what we have to say because they don't like it, but consider what our words and re-examine their views, see if perhaps we have something more truthful or valuable to offer. We ask that you be with us and guide the discussion, that you give us the words to say. We are interested in pursuing truth today, and in that line we ask that anything that we say that is untrue or is not useful to anyone is simply forgotten, but whatever we say that it is true and valuable is remembered and people apply it in their discussion with Muslims. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.
Hey.
As I said, I am joined by the Thunderous One. This will be my third live stream with him. The first one is his testimony from Islam to atheism to Christianity. And then the second one, we looked at, drawing a blank. Help me out here. What did we look at in the second live stream?
It was 123,998
yes.
prophets.
Yes, we looked at.
Sorry.
Yeah, we looked at this claim that the Hadith say that there was 124,000 prophets before Muhammad, which, and also the slightly weaker but still ridiculous claim of the Quran that a messenger was sent in every language. And we looked at how that didn't make any sense and how it was a direct contradiction to human history, how there's become more and more people over time and fewer prophets. So according to Islam, I looked at a couple different angles as to why that made no sense. So for those who have not seen you before or forgotten who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Thunderous One, 52 years old, ex-Muslim since I was legally old enough to leave home. Tried my best to believe in evolution, given the contempt that I had for a belief in God, but just couldn't reconcile the way the world was or how it's created. Eventually, to cut a long story short, concluded that the biblical narrative is reality, that there is a God, that evolution is just impossible. There are just so many angles and arguments just to destroy every line of reason that an evolutionist could ever produce, which by implication means there is a God. And when logic dictates, when you look at the evidence, that whatever the truth is, the Bible has the truth, and the truth is in there. So in effect, you could say, for the sake of a succinct response, I would say that I defend the biblical narrative.
Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about the claim in the Hadith that Adam was 90 feet tall, but we're looking at more than just this ridiculous claim. We're kind of looking at how this relates to one of the key differences between Islam and Christianity. So before we dive into the 90-foot Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have in mind as the difference between the two religions?
I think when you consider what Muhammad has to say, or what the Quran and the Hadith teach, there's sometimes a disconnection in the way that polemics and apologetics against Islam function. One of those is that when we look at the Bible and look at the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian Greek scriptures, we see that the physical dimension is not something that we can comprehend. You'll find constantly through the Bible language given that gives us an image or a vision as to what the spirit realm looks like in a very condescending way. But when you listen to what the Quran and Hadith say about heaven, it's very much a physical, as rivers of wine, virgins, promiscuity, sexual relations. I've also uploaded on my channel Yasakadi talking about the jinn, which are the spirit creatures. They're able to have children. They were on earth before human beings were on earth. So when you listen to Muslims talking about the spirit realm, it's almost like they're talking about a multiverse where their heaven is actually in a different a physical dimension or a physical reality than what ours is. But when you look at what the Bible teaches, we do not get that image at all. In fact, we get something quite contrary to that. And when you look at the history of Judaism and early Christianity, you'll find that the dying and going to heaven and doing the things that Islam claims was never something that was in their mind and in their heart. And we can see that. I'm going to bring out some scriptures to sort of like emphasize what I'm trying to say, to show that it's not just the narrative is a disconnection between the Bible and the Quran, but the realities that they talk about also lend themselves towards it. And also, so you can safely conclude these are two different gods, and they don't understand each other, or one does understand the other. One is the true God, and the other one's the liar. And we know who the source of the lie is, who the father of the lie is. But you can see that Muhammad probably didn't quite grasp what was being said as well, and that really comes through in the way that and 94 Adam is a good example to expose that. So I think what I'd like to do is just start off with, I'm not going to read all the scriptures that are in the Bible that I'd like to bring out, but I'm going to emphasize a couple. So for instance, if we go to Genesis chapter 2, you'll see that Adam is created. We see he's created on earth because the things that we know and understand are all spoken of. A garden, which we know is a physical reality. Food is spoken of, go and eat from that tree to your satisfaction. But also that animals are named, or shall I say, animals were given names by Adam. So they would all have to be in the physical realm that we understand. And also, when the God of the Bible is saying to Adam, eat, he's talking in context of what Adam can see and what Adam can relate to. And this is going to come out a little bit later when you consider 90-foot Adam and his consumption of food. So we can see that when we go through the chapter 2 of the Bible, we don't get the image that Adam was anything like a 90-foot tall man. It was all relative that we understand with biology, that we understand today. When Adam's asked to name animals, he could see the animals. He's not sort of like 90-foot tall and he has to look down, because most animals, with the exception of birds, are at ground level or in the sea. So he'll have had to have had some kind of relation to them in order to name them, to observe them and give sensible names that fit the reality or the niche that they live in. Then if you go to, say, something like Ezekiel chapter 1, for instance, you see the image of a creature in heaven that has one head but four faces, the face of an eagle, the face of a lion, the face of a bull, and the face of a man. But nobody in Judaism or Christianity would actually believe that there is such a creature living in heaven with one head and four faces. But what we do know is that it's a vision. I mean, Ezekiel at the beginning of chapter 1 is told that this is a vision. It's presented to him in a vision. So we know that they're not realities. There's also the vehicle in heaven, which is the, if you like, the carriage that has eyes within eyes, wheels within wheels that God sits on. But we know there is no such vehicle in heaven. It's illustrative for the nation of Israel that they were supposed to either keep up with the chariots, not lag behind with God's purpose and direction, but not be presumptuous or have any assumption and run ahead. So they're all teaching methods that the nation of Israel could relate to. Daniel, for instance, is another example. When he was given his visions, he was given them in, with the appearance of animals, but those animals, some of them were like gross exaggerations, like a leopard with 4 heads, or a creature with wings, or there was one that was spoken of very fearsome. They were not real creatures, or real that actually exist, but there were visions to Daniel to help us understand the context of what those creatures were and how they would fit in the moving forward as far as world powers are concerned, and their behavior would represent those creatures that Daniel writes about in the book of Daniel. Revelation 1:1 again, another book that's very symbolic, but straight from the offset, it gives us a warning at the beginning that these are presented in visions, so they're figurative, they're not literal. And I think somewhere in Islam they just don't make this connection. For Judaism and Christianity, we understand that. We understand the context of this dialogue. Muslims don't. This is why in Islam, everything in Islam is very much appeals to the flesh. It appeals to sexual desires. It appeals to consumption. And it basically appeals to real physical realities, which is something that we don't see when we're looking through the Bible. I thought an interesting scripture as well was Isaiah chapter 40 verse 18. I think I'll probably read that one, and there's a reason why I want to read this one, so I'll just pull that up.
You said 40:18.
Isaiah chapter 40 verse 18. It says there, "To whom can you compare God? What likeness can you put next to him?" And this is with reference to the nation of Israel and idolatry and creating things out of metal or wood and then bowing down to them. And here God is basically saying, well, what do I look like that you can make an image out of me? So here's a telling scripture that shows us that the spirit realm is something beyond our comprehension. We live in a physical realm where which is currently at the moment 4-dimensional, height, length and breadth, and time. Now there is an argument that light and gravity are also 2 extra dimensions that could be added, so we are living in a 6-dimensional reality, but we'll stick with the 4 because they're accepted. The 2 are speculative, so we'll leave them to the side, and it's up to people if they want to add it or not, but the 4 are a reality that are all commonly accepted. Another scripture that we can use as well is 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 27. I'd like to read this one because this one's quite interesting, because not only does God use language to show like visions and illustrations and similes and in a condescending tone to help us understand things in the spirit realm, he also mocks it as well. When people are trying to use physical attributes that belong in the physical dimension but apply them to the spiritual dimension, and Elijah does that mocking here. And I'll just read out this verse. I'll read from the
Sorry,
King
what was
James
the verse?
Version. 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 27. And so if everybody recalls this, it's Elijah. He's challenging the Baal worshippers and basically saying, if Yahweh, Jehovah, is the true God, worship him. But if Baal is the true God, go worship him. There's basically a choice, worship one or the other. And the interesting thing here as well, just from a historical context point of view, he's not speaking to Canaanites and Philistines or anyone like that. He's actually speaking to the priests that are supposed to be representing the God of the Bible. That's who the challenge is made to. Okay, so notice what he says there. He says, "And when it was noon, Elias jested at them, saying, 'Cry out with a louder voice, for he is a god, and perhaps he is not talking, or is in an inn, or on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened.'" So you'll notice there, like the cry out, he is a god, he is talking, or is in an inn, on a journey, or perhaps asleep, are all kind of like physical attributes that should not be applied to the physical to the spiritual dimension. For instance, if you look at the I think it's the Strong's version, verse 27. If you look at the transliteration of the word is sieg, and normally in this sense it's normally referred to maybe he's gone to the toilet and he's doing an excrement. He's relieving himself, which is a physical attribute. And you'll find that anyone who wants to do any research on that verse will find most Bibles don't translate it that, but when you go to the historical context of what that word is, it's actually suggesting that this God's gone to the toilet, which is a physical attribute. And then falling asleep, for instance, is a physical attribute. So there's a double mock there. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and this will come apparent, is that when we go to the hadith about 90 for Adam, this is where all of this starts to fall apart for Islam. So what I'm going to do now is actually go to the hadith where Islam gets all this from. So we've now established that the God of the Bible, when talking about the spirit realm, doesn't apply physical realities to the spirit realm, because the spirit realm is beyond our comprehension. Islam does though. And here's an example. So I'll read the hadith. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Allah created Adam, making him 60 cubits tall. When he created him, he said, go and greet that group of angels and listen to their reply, for it will be your greeting and salutation. So Adam said to the angels, Assalamu alaikum. The angel said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Thus, the angels added to Adam's salutation the expression wa rahmatullahi. Any person who will enter paradise will resemble Adam in appearance and figure. People have been decreasing in stature since Adam's creation. This is taken from Sahih Bukhari, volume 4, book 55, number 543. And the same thing is repeated again by Abu Huraira later on. But rather than read that, I'll just read where. So take it from Sahih Muslim, book 040, number 6809. It's basically the same thing, that Adam was in heaven. He greeted the angels. They responded back. That's the greeting that's countered now. When someone says Assalamu alaikum, you say wa rahmatullahi. And that he's 60 cubits tall, and human beings continued to diminish. And that's an important point, continued to diminish, because that's telling us something there. So what is 60 cubits? Well, 60 cubits, a cubit really is a measurement from your index finger to your elbow. That was the standard, which is about 18 inches or 1.5 feet. So 60 cubits translated into feet is 90 feet. That's where we get 90 for Adam from. Depending on where you live in the world and what metric system you use or measuring system you use determines whether you use cubits, whether you use meters, or whether you use feet. I prefer feet because I live in England, so that's how we do things around here. Okay, so that's the first part.
Excellent. So we have a couple comments here from the audience. Marek says that Islamic heaven could only be invented by a mentally ill sex maniac who was attracted to little girls. Strangely enough, that seems to be the description of Muhammad we find in the Islamic sources.
Pretty much so.
Veronika asked, is this 90-foot Adam not only a statue?
No, the 90-foot Adam, the hadith is quite clear that Adam was 90 foot tall. We know this because the hadith is giving us the measurements. It's actually being quite specific. It was 60 foot tall. But the hadith goes on to say as well, then the people who followed him continued to diminish in size up to this day. So Muhammad is actually adding to that. He's saying, yeah, they were 90 foot tall, but they've been decreasing in size since. Now, Muslims will turn around and say, oh, but he was only 90 foot in heaven. But when he came to earth, he wasn't. Well, we can qualify and say, no, you've actually got that wrong, because Muhammad actually challenges that statement that you're making there, because it says humans have continued to diminish. That's progressive. You know, it's an incremental step down from the previous generation. Now, using our trusty source that we get from the local halal shop, that's it, everybody, Islamic genealogy from Adam all the way to Muhammad, and we know that we've got 21 generations. How can we figure this out for Muslims? Well, I really want to help Muslims out, and as everybody knows, I'm really trying my best to try and see if the numbers stack. Well, let's see if the numbers stack on this one.
But before you get into the numbers, I did want to comment real quick about this statue thing. Veronika's thinking of a different hadith where Adam was created as a clay statue first, and the angels got confused and thought it might be Allah. I bring this up because it goes in with what we're talking about, how everything is extremely physical in Islam. So apparently Muhammad thought Adam being created in the image of Allah meant that he looked exactly like Allah. So he created this statue. The angel thought it was actually Allah. Only one angel was smart enough to figure out it wasn't. That would be Satan or Iblis. He went into the statue, figured out that it was hollow. He says, so don't worry about it. This statue's hollow, but Allah is solid. So yeah, Allah is a solid being. Being created in the image of God means that Adam looked like God. You know, not directly related to our topic, but it's a good thing to point out because it's the same idea that everything is physical, even things that any sane person would look at and be like, that couldn't possibly be physical. It's physical in Islam.
The thing is as well is that when we look at the biblical narrative, in the beginning of Genesis, it says God created the heavens and the earth. So for I should hope most creations of the Bible, that will show that the physical realm was created and then Adam afterwards, and that there wasn't a physical realm and then there came to be a physical realm, the universe that we live in at the moment. Yeah. So that would show that before the physical reality was created, the physical universe and all things inside, there wasn't anything physical. So that plane of existence is far more superior than we can possibly comprehend. That's just a logical deduction to make. The interesting thing is when you go to the Hadith, Adam's got the ability to see angels here. So we have to add these things into the equation of what Islam is talking about doesn't make sense with a narrative that is claiming to be an additional. I can see the question there, which is what I was going to go to next.
Yeah, I pulled it up because it was directly related to what you were about to talk about.
Yeah, so this is the point. So using our trusty source, the genealogy of Adam to Muhammad from any local halal shop or Google, Prophet Google for Muslims, what do we have? Well, if Adam was 90 foot tall, and I've been generous by giving each generation a 5 foot decrease rate per generation. I think that's reasonable. So Adam would have been 90 foot. Logic dictates Cain and Abel would be 85 foot. Then we start running into problems, because by the time that we get to Abraham, we have Abraham as being 55 foot. Ishmael would have been 50 foot. That's at a decrease rate of 5 foot per generation. Do we now see the problems that Islam has? But nobody ever seems to make that connection, and that's being generous at 5 foot per generation. I mean, we could do 10 foot if you want, but there are problems that are going to exist with this, and that's before we even go into the biology. So yes, 85 foot, 70, 65 foot, 60, 55 foot, and so on. Ishmael would have been 50 foot tall. And I think that for Muhammad, he must have got a confusion somewhere along the line when he read the account in the Bible about either the Nephilim or when talking about Goliath, and just didn't understand what the word giant meant and just went with some kind of size that came to his mind.
Yes, so Veronika says it should be pretty easy to find some of these huge bones or housing structures these giants left behind.
Well, that's an interesting, because the list of questions I have is, and I'll just read them out. How tall was Eve? What did they eat? How tall were the following generation, Cain, Abel, and all their siblings? How tall the subsequent following generations? What has caused humans to shrink? What did they wear? You see, if they were wearing clothing, we should find fossilized clothing, and there'd be, the size of any piece of clothing, like Eve's hijab, for instance. I'm sure she wore one. Would be, I wouldn't know how to describe the size of the materials and how they would make these materials, or what would be the logistics of sourcing the materials to make the clothing. And there should be evidence of this kind of clothing behind as well. Then there's also the fossils, as mentioned there, the remains of giant homes, tools, weapons, pots, the cooking utensils and things, and the day-to-day utensils that human beings would have used back then just for their daily running of lives. I also mentioned there before, when we get into the biology, which will be in the show notes later on, how did 94 Adam's cardiovascular system work? How did Adam's metabolism work? Then we have to ask other questions. Why do 98% of Muslims not know about Adam? Adam is the first man. If you ask any Jew or Christian about the first man, they should pretty much give you as much information contained in the Bible about him, because they'd want to know. We'd want to know what happened. Who was that first man? What happened? And how did we get here from that situation there? That's kind of like, that's a historical reality that we'd want to know. But Muslims don't seem to know anything about Adam. Why is it, for instance, that the Muslim leaders who do have access to this information seem to be reluctant to want to talk about this? We're talking about the greatest find, or the greatest human being that's ever lived, that was 90 foot tall, the progenitor of all human beings has been 90 foot tall. You'd want to talk about that if that's a reality. So I'm just looking at the question on there.
Yeah.
This goes into other realms now. For instance, this would make the car, but Abraham built a toy. Well, this is it. See, because this goes into the biology, the metabolism. Then you have to start talking about the weight of such a man. There's some show notes, I think, that you're going to put up later on about certain dimensions an engineer has done. But what's not mentioned in there is the weight on the hips, the weight on the ankles, the weights on the knees. To have a human being of that size walking upright doesn't seem to make any sense with the realities of biology as we know it today. The other thing was as well about food. When you consider the metabolism, when Adam was in the Garden of Eden, in the biblical narrative, Adam could see the food, and the God in the Bible says, eat to satisfaction. So there wouldn't have been much time needed to collect the food to eat to satisfaction. And all of the food would have been something that he could see, take hold of, fit in his hand and consume. Adam, in the Islamic sense, would have had to spend all day, every day eating food, because the amount of consumption he'd have had to have taken for his metabolism to work would have meant how much would have he needed to eat. Most food is at ground level, your root vegetables and things like that. He'll have had to, even for a tree, for instance, he'll have had to stoop on all fours. And when you consider for a human being that the biggest foods that we know in one piece, for instance, would be something like a watermelon or a pumpkin. I can't think of any food bigger than that, unless you go to some of these. I've seen them in America where they deliberately grow tomatoes the size of a wheelbarrow. I've seen some programs where they do things like that, but that kind of stuff wasn't going on in Adam's day as far as Allah is concerned. So Adam eating the biggest food, like a pumpkin or a watermelon, it would have looked like a skittle in his hand, like the little sweets that we eat, the little skittles. How much of those would he have had to have consumed in a day to maintain his existence? It beggars belief. And then when you consider a human being on all fours, that wouldn't have done his back and his neck any good, or his shoulders any good. So when you really start looking into this, the whole 90-foot Adam thing, it really doesn't. It starts falling apart, even from a biology sense.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some mathematics about how this 90-foot Adam would function. Oops, that's the wrong screen there. That's my other notepad file. 1 second here.
I've done some comparisons as well for the audience. If some of them are for amusement, and some of them actually, it kind of like shows how stupid this is. For instance, in 1933, King Kong in 1933 was only 25 foot. That should give us some kind of idea of what we're dealing with. King Kong in the 2017 Kong Skull Island is 104 foot. Godzilla in 2014 was 355. So he's just about the same size as Kong, but not quite as big as Godzilla. The Great Pyramid in Egypt is 455 foot. that would mean that Islamic Adam was 1/5 the height of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The Great Wall in China at its average height is 25 foot, 25.5 feet. The French Arc de Triomphe is 164 feet, so Adam would have been just over half the size of the Arc de Triomphe. The Statue of Liberty from crown to toe is 111 feet. So this guy is, another way of looking at it, is 15 times the size of an average 6-foot man. The Google average for floor to ceiling for an average house is 9 feet. So this would mean that Adam, Islamic Adam, would have been the size of 8 to 9 story tall building. And Adam would have been 1/6 the height of the Washington Monument, which is at 555 feet. So the numbers just do not stack, and it's ludicrous when you consider trying to put a human being, when you measure it in image to, say, the Arc de Triomphe, and that when you have that image in your mind, it just further blows this hadith apart and what Muslims believe. And another question as well is, why Muslims don't want to talk about this? Why aren't Muslims informed about this? Why are the leaders hiding this from their followers?
Definitely. So I have after some playing around there, I finally got the notes on the biology up on the screen. Tell us, we don't have to go through all the specifics. I'll post these in the video description or a pinned comment as well. But tell us a little bit about where these numbers come from, what they tell us about the plausibility of this 90-foot Adam.
Well, they came from, I didn't actually put these numbers together. I'd actually done this talk for an atheist show several years ago. Well, it's actually about 3 years ago. So I couldn't use any of the biblical narrative at the time because it was an atheist show, and they didn't want someone like me coming on the show and mention the Bible because I felt it was I was doing some kind of form of apologetics, which it wasn't. So this is actually one of the guys that's an atheist actually put those points up there about how it's just not possible to have a human or any creature for that of that size could exist. Now, Muslims would argue and say, well, the non-Muslims are idiots and fools. Do they not know that dinosaurs existed? Now, it's true. I think it was in the 1850s when the iguanodon was the first dinosaur found. And if you go further back in time with artistry impression of dinosaurs, you'll find that most dinosaurs are actually walking vertically. But now that we understand biology better, we now find that most dinosaurs actually walk horizontally, even like the two-legged dinosaurs, like your velociraptors or your Tyrannosaurus rex or your Allosaurus and such. And their tail serves as a counterbalance. One of the reasons for that is because of the blood flow to the brain. The brain takes about 20% of the blood flow. So one of the reasons that they walk in a more horizontal fashion is because of the blood flow to the brain. So using the argument of dinosaurs simply just does not work.
Excellent.
And it's the same thing with the giraffe. A giraffe is on average about 20 foot. What Muslims don't understand is if they're going to try and sight a giraffe, which is incidentally 1/4 the height of Muslim Adam, is the heart structure and the veins in the neck of a giraffe to pump the heart, to pump the blood all the way to the brain. The giraffe has actually got quite a large heart for that cardiovascular system to work. And if people are going to cite whales, well, whales, the thing is with whales, they're actually counterbalanced by water, and they are horizontal creatures as well.
Excellent. So we have a couple Muslims in the chat trying to distract. This is just a public warning here that please stay on topic. Comments that are off topic will be ignored, or worse, you will be put in timeout. We have a specific topic today. I do live streams on Christianity all the time. Amazingly, when I do a live stream on Christianity, no Muslims show up. But when I do a live stream on Islam, they all show up and want to talk only about Christianity. Very interesting stuff. Basically they're attacking the reliability of the gospel. Well, I did 3 live streams in the last 2 weeks on the reliability of the Bible. So there you go. You had your chance. It is not now. We are going to continue talking about the Islamic teachings. If you find the Islamic teachings false, if that doesn't make Christianity true, but if you find Christianity's teachings false, that doesn't make Islam true. So in that sense, you're just avoiding the issue. Maybe Islam and Christianity are both false. Attacking Christianity does not make Islam true. You're just wasting your time, and you're putting your eternal soul in peril by not considering the truth of your own religion, just distracting yourself by thinking something else in some other religion is stupid.
There is when you look at the images that I gave sent forward to you, you'll find two images of one is of just planet Earth, and the other one is a model of three planets in succession of Earth, or images of Earth, or models of Earth. Because one of the Muslim arguments about to try and rationalize a 90-foot man is that the Earth in its past was smaller and allegedly scientifically proven, and then Earth increased in size. Well, this is just ludicrous, because you see, for something to increase in size, particularly if it's physical, you have to get mass from somewhere in order for it to expand in its size. A simple illustration with me: if I want to blow up a balloon, I would have to inhale oxygen, put that mass into my lungs, then transfer it to sorry, that's just distracted me. So I'll go back to my point. So I'll have to take in oxygen in my lungs, then transfer the mass of oxygen from my lungs into the balloon, and therefore the balloon expands. So we can see a transference of mass from one location to another. So I would like to ask Muslims who believe in the Earth expanding from a smaller planet to a larger planet, because a smaller planet would have had less gravity, therefore you would have had human beings that grew to 90 foot tall. You've got many problems with that. One, where did the extra mass come from? Number two, if you reduce the size of Earth, what in effect you're doing is you're distancing Earth from the sun. The sun, the planet Earth at this moment in time, with its size and circumference, is the perfect size and the perfect distance in relation to the sun for life to exist on Earth. And one of those things would be the water cycle, and for heat. If you reduce the planet in its mass, what's happening is you're moving the planet actually further away from the sun, and therefore that's the image. Therefore what you're doing is you're reducing you're increasing the distance from the sun and to the Earth. Therefore the water cycle doesn't take place, and you're actually making Earth colder, and therefore life would not exist in the way that we understand it at the moment. A second thing as well, to Muslims seem to want to ignore on this, is if you reduce the land mass by reducing the size of the planet, you've got a water problem, because you see the Earth is 2/3 water. So if you reduce the size of the planet, fine, you can create some kind of Pangea one continent thing, but would it really be one continent with all that water? Where does the water go? In effect, it will become a planet or a ball of water. It wouldn't be a planet with one land mass and water surrounding that, because the water's got to go somewhere. So even that argument doesn't work.
Excellent. So let me put up this other image here, which I find quite interesting. There's some small technological problems I've been having with the images. So just give me 1 second here. Sorry, the computer's lagging. So we got up here a picture of the 90-foot or 30-meter atom in comparison to a dinosaur, Brachiosaurus or Apatosaurus, I'm not sure which one, and a normal man.
Yeah, and in that image, it's interesting to note that that's actually as you say correctly, it's a brachiosaurus. But we know brachiosaurus would have walked more with its head leaning forward rather than upright. Now that we understand biology, and I think, and this is an alleged comment, I'm inclined to agree with it. But I mean, obviously, some people who follow the biblical narrative can maybe challenge that. But the Book of Job talks about the tail of something like this. I'm inclined to agree that that's what he's talking about. And you get the image that these creatures were using its tail to counterbalance the length of the neck, because they walked more with their necks leaning forward. And we now understand that they had hollow bones and their bone structure worked on hydraulics. But that's the subject for another time. So to argue that dinosaurs are proof that a 90-foot man could exist is just ludicrous. And you'll also note that all creatures, after they get to about a certain weight, all start walking on four legs. In fact, anything bigger than a horse is walking on four legs. In fact, most creatures walk on four legs. It's only really humans that spend all their time on two, as well as birds, of course. So the weight is distributed.
Excellent. So our next image here, we have a man standing beside what appears to be a giant footprint.
Yeah, this is an image I got years ago, and I forget what the word is, and it's when somebody looks at an image and they see something religious in it. For instance, somebody once picked up a pork crackling, and they felt that they were looking at something like Jesus, Mary holding the baby Jesus, or somebody burnt a piece of toast and it looked like the face of Christ in it. And Muslims do the same thing as well. They see a fish and it looks like it's got the name of Allah on it, or they cut open a tomato and it's got Allah's name in it. There's a word for people that see religious things in physical objects. And this is just another example where the defense of 90-foot Adam was made, because here's something that looks like the footprint of a man in rock. I mean, two questions have to be asked there. One, you can't get a footprint in rock. Okay. And second thing is, what posture was he in, if it was, to get his foot there like that? What was he doing? Questions need to be asked. But this is, go on.
Yeah, maybe our 90-foot Adam could also climb rocks vertically. Just
Yeah.
his feet were really sticky or something. He could walk up the rock. Of course, this would either be something that a human being did to make this formation,
Yeah.
or it would be just a case where there was a softer rock in this particular place and it weathered out, and it just happens to vaguely match the shape of a human foot.
It's just one of those anomalies where something can look like something, but it's not. It has no meaning, it has no purpose, and it has no relevance. It's just an anomaly. It's a bit like many years ago, before supermarkets insisted on having all the cucumbers the same size and the same shape. You'd have, say, a carrot that sort of joined together, so it looked like two legs, and at the top of it had a little stub, so it looked like a carrot with two legs and a penis. It's just an anomaly. It's not the way that God intended for carrots to be harvested or to grow. It's just an anomaly. I don't know if you had programs like that in America, but in England, we used to have programs where people used to send in vegetables that looked like genitalia.
Never seen a program like that, but I know the idea. Sometimes you see these kind of things on eBay or whatever. They'll say, here's my potato chip that looks like President in Trump or something like that.
Yeah. So that's what Muslims are. I think you see Muslims do this when you watch some of the YouTube channels. There's a word for it, but I forget what the word is, where you see religious imagery in natural phenomenon. Looking at clouds and you can see something, and someone saw the word Allah in clouds, and it's stupid, really. There is another image, though. Are you going through the images?
Yeah, but I wanted to share a couple humorous comments from the audience first. Veronika says, now we have it. The dinosaurs were pets. I think that's about right. If there was a 90-foot Adam and a 50-foot dinosaur or 40-foot dinosaur at the same time, then the dinosaur could be his pet.
But the thing is with that, I would challenge that as far as Muslims are concerned, because Muslims don't believe that Adam and dinosaurs and man were around at the same time. They don't answer and they steer away from the subject of dinosaurs. Now, for somebody who follows the Bible, the biblical narrative, we can answer that, and we've got all the evidence in the world to back up our claim for what we believe, which was, for me, and I think you might agree, you may not, that dinosaurs or dragons, because that's the etymology that we really need to look at. The word dragon would have been something that was in existence at the time of man earlier on, and certainly in the Garden of Eden.
I take a neutral position on the age of the Earth type issues because I don't consider them important.
No, you're quite right. You're quite right. They're not, but the evidence lends itself towards more, if you like. But that's not relative to the subject.
Yes. So Philippians 2:10 says Adam's breakfast was a cow, an elephant, and 10 trees, a spring of water. Alhamdulillah.
Was that because that yeah? But when did halal come into place? You see, I'd be asking questions as well. Why are they? When did Muslim Adam get the prescription to eat meat? We know when we were given the prescription to eat meat, but when did Islam get the prescription to eat meat, and why? See, they don't believe the things that we know. For instance, the canopy of water that was around the earth that was used for the floodwaters, the source of the floodwaters. Islam doesn't have that. So that has to be taken into consideration yet again when we're looking at the biblical narrative, when we're looking at the Islamic narrative, and the differences between the two, and certain things that we don't mention or we should be mentioning and challenging Muslims on, because it's not just about 90-foot Adam, it's all those little things, the little components that go with the narrative that they seem to be omitting in their narrative that are quite important.
Excellent. Mr. said that Adam was as big as a mountain. Stephen, the comments intend to be humorous, I assume, but it actually raises a good point. He says, how big was Eve's birth hole for Cain and Abel? And I said it raises a good point because if people have been getting progressively shorter or got progressively shorter for a while, that would seem to indicate that women probably had a very easy time giving birth in the olden days, which would be a direct contradiction of the biblical narrative that Adam, or I mean, I was going to say Adam and Eve, but really just Eve was punished with pain in childbirth for disobeying God. And it'd be like, well, actually, I think it was relatively easy if you kept giving birth to children that were going to be smaller to you when they grow up.
The thing is on that as well, Thaddeus, actually, Stephen Gilchrist mentions an interesting point, because when you think about Adam, for him, for a 90-foot man to have intimacy with, you have to assume, equally 90-foot woman, the blood pressure or that the heart would have to pump for an erection, I think would lead to Adam passing out. I don't think the heart could have pumped the blood to the brain and maintain that pressure whilst providing adequate pressure for an erect penis.
That's a good point, because that's kind of unusual among humans that we don't have a bone in the penis to help support it, that it's done entirely with blood pressure, as you say. So that would create a unique problem for human beings being that large.
Yeah. And that also leads itself to other difficulties. For instance, Eve giving birth to a baby that was X amount big. How big was the baby? How much would Eve needed to have eaten in order to maintain her own cardiovascular system and health, but also provide enough nutrients for the new babies that she was giving birth to?
So Avoicein The Dark, who is a Muslim, is pushing back a little bit on this. He says, all this talk about impossibility of the stature of Adam, wouldn't that in a way say there are things that God cannot do? Would you like to respond to that first, and then I may add some thoughts?
Well, God can't create a square circle. God can't create a mountain that he can't pick up. There are things that God can't do because they're logically impossible. We are creatures that are designed with a brain that has logic. One of those things, going back to the biblical narrative that was discussed at the beginning, is that God, the creator of the Bible, the author of the Bible, he knows the human brain because he designed it. He knows how it functions, and he also gives us dignity of working things out. Okay, we don't need God telling us the minor, the details, including the intricate details, and spoon feed us what the answers are. He gives us enough information for us to conclude an answer, because there's a certain satisfaction in us working out things for ourselves, and he knows that we get that satisfaction of working things out for ourselves because he designed us that way. And it also, when we work things out for ourselves, it makes that relationship between us and God that much more stronger, because because we feel we've accomplished something. That's why when we accomplish things, we feel good about it. When something does something for us, and you take someone for granted, they don't feel good about it. We don't feel good about it either. There's no sense of satisfaction in that. So when he's talking about, for instance, that God can or cannot do, there are things that we know God cannot do because they're logically impossible. But also we know that God, in this instance, we're created understanding laws and physics. That's why I have Newtonian laws of physics, quantum mechanics, and they're all within the realms of mathematics that our brains been designed to understand. So when we can't encounter anything where Muslims will just pass this off as it's just a miracle of Allah, well, that does not work in the realm of existence that we have at the moment. It's not an escape clause or a trump card. That's being disrespectful and discourteous.
Yeah, I would add that the Christian view of God, and I believe the Islamic view would be similar, is that God is consistent, that God does not just change his mind willy-nilly, and that he put certain physical laws in the universe when he created it. Could he have created the universe with different physical laws? Well, presumably he could have, but because he created it with certain physical laws, we can expect those laws to apply equally during the time of Adam and now. So if Adam was what we see about the stature of Adam is physically impossible given the current laws of physics, then we can assume it was impossible at that time as well, which only leaves the possibility that it was a miracle that violates the laws of physics. I mean, that is kind of what a miracle is, something that violates natural laws. But miracles have purpose, and here we just have this giant atom for no apparent reason. And then people have been progressively getting shorter. That sounds like some sort of biological process. That doesn't sound like, God miraculously sustained this 90-foot atom, and then he miraculously sustained this 85-foot cane all through all this time. If you're going to suggest that this is a miracle, then there has to be a purpose to it. And I can think of a possible purpose. That would be if we had found this skeleton of this 90-foot atom or had been preserved for us, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I think it's what I want us to bear in mind that they came from a realm that's supposed to be spiritual, but in Islamic parlance, it has physical attributes. So how is the Islamic heaven, spirit realm, any different to the physical realm that we're living in at the moment? The interesting thing is Muhammad went on the winged donkey and flew to the seventh heaven, and at each stage of the heaven he met a prophet and spoke to each one, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and such. And then he goes into Allah's heaven, speaks to Allah. When you look at that hadith, there's another one that when people go back to heaven, they'll resemble Adam. Okay, the thing is, and they'll all be 90 foot tall. But the thing is, you see, how would you know you're 90 foot tall in heaven, and what difference would that make? The relevance of being 90 foot tall only has a relevance here in the physical earth, in the physical realm, not in the spirit realm, because everything is relative to the plane of existence that you're living in. So being 90 foot tall in heaven has no meaning or impact or any relevance at all. Assuming heaven, if you want to, like for the sake of discussion with the Muslim, does have physical attributes, which it doesn't, but let's say it does. Being 90 foot tall in heaven What does that actually mean? What's the purpose of that? It has no relevance in any way that we understand it at the moment.
Excellent. So a voice in the dark had a second comment. He said, not only that, but I read about Abraham built a toy Kaaba, not considering the span of time between Adam and Abraham. Well, first of all, I'll point out that was an audience comment about the Kaaba being a toy, but you went ahead and explained how tall Abraham would be, taking into account the Islamic system of time. Since apparently a voice in the dark was here at that time but wasn't paying close attention, why don't you go ahead and repeat why you say that Abraham would still be very tall?
Well, for me, it would still be very tall because you have to look at the 5 foot decrease rate between one generation to the next. So if Adam is 90 foot tall, we have to look at some kind of decrease rate in order to understand where we are in the stream of time and how that applies. So I've given a 5 foot decrease rate per generation. Cain and Abel would have been 85 foot, and Islam only has 21 generations from Adam to Muhammad. So logic dictates a 5 foot decrease rate per generation leads Abraham to being 55 foot tall. The Muslims have to explain this.
So a voice in the dark did not like our response. He said, did he just say that there are things God cannot do? Well, let me ask you this question.
Actually, I've got an answer for that. Can God have a son? Can God have a son? There's something that your Allah can't do. Your Allah cannot have a son. There you go. There's your answer. And I'm using your religion to answer the question. That's what your faith teaches. He can't have a son. Next question.
Yes. So I was going to say something along the same lines. It was like, can God lie, or can God sin, or all kinds of things like that that would violate the nature of God. But our actual point was that if something's a logical contradiction, then obviously God can't do that because it literally makes no sense. You can't have a square circle. By a definition of a circle, it's not square. It's a logical contradiction. You can't have both by the definition of the term. And kind of along the same lines are the physical laws that God has put in the universe. He put these laws in place. They can't be violated apart from a special miracle of God's work. And a special miracle requires an explanation why God would do that. Are you saying that your God is just arbitrary, that he created Adam so large for absolutely no reason, and he just created each subsequent generation smaller for absolutely no reason whatsoever? Because that seems to be what you're telling me.
But I'd like to know, why is it then that when Muslim Adam was jettisoned from heaven to the physical realm, earth, why is it that human beings have been decreasing in size? There must be a reason why human beings have been decreasing, and then that decrease rate has now stopped. So what is the Muslim explanation for that? Why has Allah put that thing in place, that when human beings go from the spirit realm, or Allah's version of the spirit realm, to the physical realm that we live in, that we understand now, why is that decrease rate there?
So a voice in the dark said he can, I'm going to presume this is to have, in response to have a son. So he can have a son if he wanted to. The question is why? Well, that's exactly the question we're asking you. Christianity has a very good explanation for why God took on flesh and entered the world through the person of Jesus Christ, the Son. You may reject that reason, but we certainly have a reason. It's certainly not arbitrary. I have not heard any reason whatsoever about why Allah would create Adam 90 feet tall and then make people get smaller. And then, as Thunderous just pointed out, why this process of getting shorter over time suddenly came to an end. There's no explanation for any of this. So if you're going to propose that Allah can do this, well, that's not an explanation. You need an explanation why by your own criteria that you just proposed.
But then that would also have to, that miracle that A Voice in the Dark is talking about, it would have to start with Adam. It's a miracle that Allah sustained then. So Allah sustained the miracle from Adam being jettisoned on earth all the way to his death. then you'll have to have had to sustain that from the next generation to the next generation so it's a constant set of miracles that Allah has provided mankind all the way down till we got to about 6 foot tall. And yet there is no mention of this sustaining of miracles of height stature in the Hadith or in the Quran. And you would think the greatest biological event in the history of mankind, which is human beings so tall, is not even mentioned. And you would think Allah would mention that because it would prove the Quran true if it was. There'd be evidence for this. We see no evidence with pots and pans. We see no evidence with tools and implements they may have used. We see no evidence of clothing. We don't even see evidence of 90-foot, 80-foot, 70-foot men's feces. And that is not to say that in a humorous way, because we actually have dinosaur feces. So we know that what foods they ate, because we've got the dung of certain herbivore dinosaurs. But we don't find excrement of 90-foot human beings.
So this will be the last comment from Avoicein The Dark, unless he comes up with something substantive. He again is just asserting that God could create something that tall. He says God created the atom and something smaller. So why can he? Why? I think he means, so why can't he create someone 90 feet tall? We're not suggesting that God couldn't do this. We're suggesting there's no explanation whatsoever. It violates the laws of physics, which would make it have to be a special miracle. There's no explanation for this special miracle. There's no evidence for this special miracle. There's no mention of this special miracle in the Islamic texts of getting shorter. It's just a giant hole in the explanation here. There's a giant gap in the story, and your only explanation is, well, God could do that. Well, great, but again, God is a God of consistency. God wants us to look at the world. He wants us to understand the world. Unless you're suggesting that your God is a God of confusion, then there needs to be some sort of explanation for the things he does.
I think just on that as well, I like to add that it says God created the atom. Okay, it's very small, but it operates with mathematical equations that we understand. So if you work, or your brain's been trained as a scientist to work in the environment where atoms are something that you look at on a daily basis, or discuss, or create equations about, those equations are based on mathematical principles that we understand that are very real and consistent within the universe. That's how we're able to make predictions. That's how we're able to make put forward theories, so on and so forth. But with 90-foot Adam, we're going beyond the realm of something that we understand. That's why it's a problem for us to understand it, because it's beyond the realms of biology, engineering, metabolism, cardiovascular system, digestive system, food consumption. Every avenue we look at this, even to the maintenance of an erection so he can impregnate a 90-foot woman, does not make sense.
Excellent. So I challenge Avoicein The Dark to come up with some sort of explanation besides God can do whatever he wants, because by suggesting that God does things for no reason whatsoever, you're making your God arbitrary, a God of confusion. If that's what you want to say about Allah, then by all means go ahead and say that, but that is not the kind of God that I am interested in, and I think it's not the kind of God most people are interested in. So switching gears here a bit, Steve Spence says there are bones of humans from the time of Abraham, and I'll add, and prior to that, there is no bones of a 90-foot human. However, I have an image here that I'll go ahead and share.
First of all, just to Steve Spence there, we're looking at it from the perspective of the genealogy that you find at the local halal shop, where if you Google research as well, you only have 21 generations from Adam to Muhammad. So we have to use the Islamic genealogy as proposed by Muslims in order to understand 90-foot Adam. So if we were looking at, say, 90-foot Adam, and that was something that was made in a claim in the Bible about that Adam was 90 foot, or let's assume we have 73 generations to work some kind of mathematical equation out from Adam all the way to Jesus. So we can try and put some kind of figures there. Not that we ever would, because we don't believe that. But the problem is greater for Islam, because you only have 21 generations from Adam to Muhammad. And by the time you get to Abraham, he's still 55 foot tall. There's the problems. as well as many others. And this one here, that's just there's no story behind that. That's just one that I found. But it just shows you that I think this is probably purported, but did the circuit in the Islamic circles to try and prove that there's a conspiracy hiding these evidences to prove the Islam is true. But that's not the one that's the real.
Yeah, I'll bring up the other fraud image in a second, but I just wanted to comment on this one. Obviously, they just photoshopped this image of a, this equipment here and these tiny little people into the image of an actual skull. You can tell if you look closely that these rocks are not of the right scale for this to be real. And I mean, just looking at it, the coloring's not quite right. You can tell that this was just dropped in by Photoshop.
I think as well, when you're looking at imagery like this, that in itself should show you the weight of the skull, the weight of the brain inside the skull, and all the other components like the eyes, the tongue, and the teeth and such. The amount of pressure that will have put on the neck. Now this, I wish I had the presence of mind about 15 years ago when I first came across this, because I came across about 90 Adam about 15 years ago. There was a story put out by, I think, and I stand to be corrected, I think it was Ali Sina, who is an ex-Muslim that put out a lot of information against Islam. He put that out, or one similar to this, and he put a story underneath it. The Jewish scientist confirms Islamic teaching of 90-foot Adam, and it went wildfire on the internet. And he did it deliberately to see how quick Muslims will get onto the narrative in order to prove that Islam is true. So it was a bogus setup, and this is the image that he used to set the Muslim world up. You can't find any trace of it now because they've deleted all their websites and pages of this because it was found to be a fraud. But it's a fantastic Photoshop there. The interesting thing is, in these instances, though, is why is it always an atheist and a Jew or a Christian that's constantly proving Islam true? Muslim scientists seem to be incapable of proving Islam true. It's always the atheist, the Jew, and the Christian that's proving Islam true.
Yeah, I will say that this Photoshop image here is much better than the other one. This one at least looks realistic. They really took the time to get the scale of things right. Unlike that previous image where it looks like they spent 5 minutes and just dropped it in. But of course, if this was actually a real discovery, there would be scientific papers about it. There would be news stories about it. There'd be all kinds of things about it. You wouldn't have to just rely on some image you found on the internet.
To be honest with you, if let's just go with let's assume it's true for a moment, and they did find it in Wales, it would be the greatest find in archaeological history or paleontological history. It would be the greatest find of mankind. The world would have changed. The world that we understand it now would change. This would give credibility to intelligent design, and it will certainly, and evolution shouldn't even exist as a doctrine now, but this would definitely be the final nail in the coffin if it was true. So the world that we live in at the moment would be different. This would have changed the world and the direction it would have gone in.
Just share a couple more funny comments that had me laughing while I was reading them. Akara says that measuring tapes were just smaller back then. That's how they figured out that Adam was 60 cubits tall. And then Philippians 2:10 says, I wonder why there were no dinosaurs. Adam ate all the baby Rexes and gave some to Eve, and Allah knows best.
Well,
of course, we're having some fun with this topic, but there is a serious issue here, and this isn't directly related to the serious issue we're discussing here is whether the God of Islam is consistent, whether the God of Islam understands spiritual reality, or whether he considers everything physical. But I wanted to bring up this comment from Nix that says, how tall was Eve according to Islam if Adam was 90 feet? Would you like to comment on that, and then I'll have something to add?
I don't think there is a response to be made. It's not mentioned. The only thing that I recall mentioned about Eve is when they were sort of evicted from Islamic heaven. Adam apparently fell somewhere like in Indonesia, and Eve landed in Jeddah. This is why Jeddah is called the motherland or the land of the mother. Um, and they say that she's buried there. So that's as far as I know. There is no sort of like information given as to how tall she is, but that's the limited information we have.
Yeah, and that's exactly the answer I expected you to say, and that's why I brought this up. It's reflective of the general treatment of women in the Islamic narrative, that they're simply an after act. If you look at the Quran, there is only one woman given that her name is mentioned, and that is Mary, the mother of Jesus. No other woman is given a name. They all are just the wife of so and so, or the
Mm.
mother of so and so, or the sister of so and so, or the Queen of Sheba, which is still just a title. That's as close as you get to a name. There is no Eve in the Quran. Eve has very minimal attention in the Hadith literature. Women are just kind of an afterthought in Islam.
Can I just add on that as well? I think several years ago, Mufti Menk did a discussion on Adam and Eve when they were expelled from heaven. I think he confirms it's Indonesia where Adam landed, and that Eve landed somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula, and they had a job finding each other, which is interesting because she pretty much, in Islamic parlance, and sat there doing nothing, waiting for Adam to turn up. And when you consider whether you're 90 foot tall or not, the logistics of getting from Indonesia to Saudi Arabia and finding someone, is akin to me for an aeroplane throwing out like 10 cents in Texas and sending me over there to find that 10 cents that fell out the aeroplane. The logistics are impossible. So Adam finding Eve is just ludicrous to consider. That being said, I think it's Mufti Menk because it sounds like Mufti Menk, but there was no sort of like video image of him talking. He did not at any point in the discussion mention the heights of these two human beings. He was more going on about, look at the effort them two made to want to be with each other. That's how husband and wife should be in their marriage, should make the effort to want to be with each other, which is a nice story, very nice, lovely. Shame your prophet didn't sort of continue that with wife beatings, and women are meant to twice as stupid as a man, and a woman walking in front of a man can nullify his prayer just like a dog and a donkey can. So basically a woman's the same as a dog and a donkey in Islamic parlance. But the Muslims are reluctant. The point I'm trying to make is Muslims are reluctant to mention the height. And you would think if you're talking about a 90-foot man landing in Indonesia and a 90-foot or 85-foot or even an 80-foot woman landing in Jeddah or Saudi Arabia or in the Arabian Peninsula, their height would be of a significant talking point.
Excellent. So Veronika raises a good point. She says, to be fair, maybe we should talk about the Nephilim of the Bible. Anything you'd like to say on that subject?
When we use the word giant, it's kind of like relative. We use the word giant like I'm trying to think. That company is a giant, or that's a giant thing to do. He made a giant leap. It's kind of proportionate and relative. So when the Bible uses the word giants, we shouldn't think of, say, the problem living in the 21st century, or say the past 150 years with literature, is that when they start talking about fantastic things, like Gulliver's Travels, for instance, and the word giant is used, you have a mental image that's created through literature and artwork and fantasy. So the word giant is associated with something that you've read in as a comic, or maybe a storybook, or you've watched a movie and you see something that's referred to as a giant, like a giant ape in King Kong, and your automatic assumption is when you word associate, so an image is built up in your mind. So when the word giant is mentioned in the Bible, we're not looking at the context of what that word meant at that period of time. What were the Nephilim? Yeah, they were clearly very big human beings, but they but I don't think the word giant, it was relative. Maybe they were 9 or 10 feet tall, not 90 foot tall. There's a difference between the two. So the word giant would have been relative and proportionate to what biology, to the biology that we understand today as well. And considering that they were the offspring of demons, that's angels that decided to forsake their places and have relations with human being women, which is even more disgusting if we want to discuss it. When you consider a man having sex with an animal, which is what the Canaanites were doing, as far as their worship was to their gods was concerned, bestiality was normal. Okay, that has been historically proven. Bestiality was normal, yet a man or a woman having sex with an animal is far closer and cleaner, if you like, even though it's perverse, than when an angel forsook his place in heaven with God, materialized a human body and came down and had sex with a human being woman. That gulf was more perverse. So it did produce something, and we can't apply, oh, God, like Muslims do, it was a miracle of Allah or miracle of the God of the Bible, because God would not bless perversion like that and allow it to be sustained.
Excellent. Exactly. If, the average person's height was, say, 5'6" at that time, I don't know what it would be, but I'm sure it was less than today, because people have actually gotten slightly taller, not like hundreds of feet taller or dozens of feet taller, but people have gotten slightly taller over time due to better nutrition and such. So if, say, the average person was 5'6", 5'8", or something, someone who is 8 feet tall would definitely be a giant in comparison. But of course, there's no physical problems with a human being 8 feet tall or even 10 feet tall.
I think Goliath is referred to as a giant, but we're given what his measurements are in the Bible as well. But so the word giant, this is what I'm saying about what's relative. So when the word giant is used, we get a relative proportion because we're given the dimensional measurements. Also, when you look at, say, the WWE, you've had men in there like, I don't watch American wrestling, but I know that you had someone like The Undertaker or Andre the Giant, or there was another one who came from India, Kali, or something like that, some great giant Indian guy that went into the WE or WWE, whatever it is. So human beings being of a disproportionate size does happen. It happens. And we don't have to refer to them as being hundreds of feet tall or dozens of feet tall to refer to them as giants. We can refer to somebody as being a giant, which is something more abnormal to what the average is.
Excellent. So I think Avoicein The Dark has left the chat. He said he was going to, but this reply to him from Islam Logique is excellent here. He says, there are no positive evidence for Islam. All you have is special pleadings. And that, whether Avoicein The Dark realizes it or not, that's exactly what he was doing. He can't come up with an explanation why God would create Adam 90 feet tall. He can't come up with any evidence that human beings used to be very tall. He can't come up with any evidence for anything in Islam. I don't know everything about him, obviously, but I do know that actually he was in my live stream a number of months ago, Make Me a Muslim Day, where I challenged any Muslim to bring any positive case for the truth of Islam whatsoever, and he didn't have anything to say that day. He just kept saying like it was a waste of time to try to prove it or stuff along those lines. So if you have no positive evidence, all you can do is the special pleading. Say, well, we know that a human being can't normally be 90 feet tall, but God could do that if he wanted. We don't have any explanation for why God created Adam that tall, but he could do it if he wanted to, and so on and so forth. And that's just really sad, because obviously if you're going to say, well, God can do anything, you could say that for absolutely any religion on the planet. Let's put it this way. The problems that you think Christianity has, if a Christian, their only answer to those is, well, God could do it if he wanted to, so why is it a problem for you? Would you accept that? I don't think you would. So why do you accept that for Islam?
I think the thing with Islam is the case of Muhammad or Allah says something, and there's a perverse form of rationalization to justify it. They have no choice but to try and find some way. And when biology, history, and archaeology and logic are all removed from the defense of anything that Islam says, you have to fall on AKB. Allah knows best, or it's down to Allah. It's very much like when Muslims say, or they try to defend the splitting of the moon. And the latest ludicrous response I've heard is, it happened at night when everybody was sleeping. So this is why nobody reported it, because it should have been seen in India, the Middle East, and the African, and maybe some parts of the European continent. The greatest celestial event since the universe's creation, and Allah performed it for only maybe 2 people to see, and nobody reported it because they were all asleep.
So Veronika answered that Goliath was described as 6 cubits in the Bible, which would make him about 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
Very unusual, obviously, but not impossible by any means.
No, it's like you say, when you consider the sizes of certain basketball stars or certain wrestling stars. I don't know how big the tallest wrestling star was, but Andre, just the names, Andre the Giant or Kali. I mean, these are big human beings. So if you can accept, say Andre the Giant, I don't suppose you can quickly Google that. Could you? I actually might just do that myself.
Yeah, I can pull up an image in a second here. We talked about this earlier, but Muhammad Pedo pulled up the hadith, that people in paradise will resemble Adam in appearance and figure, and then he said that everybody is a giant in paradise. And you pointed this out earlier, but I think it bears repeating that, that this idea that everyone is, why is there a physical reality at all in paradise? What is the purpose of everyone being 90 feet tall in paradise?
See, this is it. Yes, applying physical attributes to the spiritual dimension, which is a form of stupidity that the God of the Bible actually mocked people who do that. When Elijah was at Mount Carmel, that was the very thing that Elijah did. He mocked those that are applying physical attributes to the spiritual dimension in that one moment, because it just does not happen. You can't apply physical realities to the spiritual dimension when you consider the spiritual dimension existed before physical realities. As we say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it's normally spoken of the physical reality that we live in at the moment. And God lives outside of the physical. The physical only came into existence by virtue of his power. So it's stupid. But the thing is, I'll go one further. Muhammad went to heaven on a winged horse. So did he mutate to being the 90-foot tall human being when he got to heaven? Do you see the problems? He did not say, well, while I was up there, I got to know what it's like to be 90 foot tall. None of these things are mentioned. And you would think if being 90 foot tall has any relevance, he would have mentioned being 90 foot tall and confirmed it and supported it. But he didn't.
So I did go ahead and get an image of Andre the Giant here next to some ordinary height human beings. And certainly anyone who is faced with a human being of that size would say, wow, that guy's really a giant.
Yeah.
No need for him to be 90 feet tall to be considered a giant.
And it's all relative, because it's beyond the average, it's beyond the normal. So you would refer to, well, as clearly in Andre's case, he was referred to as Andre the Giant, and he was. I just looked at as well, 7'4". So 9 foot tall is only just a foot and a bit more than he is, 1.5 foot taller than Andre.
Yes, and so Villainous pointed out that there's a known scientific process behind this, that there's a hormonal defect called giantism that causes people to get really big. Basically, the growth hormone that causes you to grow as a child never stops being produced, and you just continually grow throughout your life. So we have a known biological process that causes people to get this size. We don't need to propose a special miracle of God. unlike the Islamic situation.
Yeah, absolutely, and yet again, these examples merely show up the desperateness of the Muslim defense of 90-foot Haddam, because they've got that presupposition: I'm born Muslim. This is what my religion teaches, so I've now got to try and defend what my prophet or God say. Hence why you've got the ridiculous arguments of, well, back in time, Earth was smaller. But even when you analyze that with mathematics and the understanding of the environment that we understand, the solar system that we live in at the moment, that if the Earth was smaller, that creates a bigger distance between the Earth and the Sun. Therefore, the water cycle doesn't work. The heat rays hitting Earth will be at a different rate. You'd have to explain where the mass come from for the Earth to expand, and also where the planet will be just full of water. There'd be no surface area for Adam to stand on, because where would the water go?
Exactly. And Veronika pointed out that a miracle that no one sees is pointless. Again, and I think our friend Avoicein The Dark left, but this is what we're saying, that if you're going to propose that it's a special miracle for Adam to be that size, you need to provide some sort of explanation. Just saying, well, God can do it is the fallacy of special pleading.
If you want to use the word miracle, the whole point of the miracle is it's a testimony to God. That's why those things take place. They take place to show who the real God is and who the fake gods are, and to show that he's acting on a bunch of these people over here. That's the whole point. Every miracle you see in the Bible is a testimony as to who the real God is, and if that's what you're up against. Even the Philistines knew that, and you know that because of the way they treated the Ark of the Covenant when they took it, when it took hold of it. And also Rahab is another fantastic testimony of this. Her attitude towards the spies and her devotion, her recognition of who the God of the Bible is, to the point that her faith was so fantastic, she gets put into the genealogy of Jesus, as does her son Boaz. So miracles are there for a reason. They're not just they're not a trump card get out clause when you can't explain something Islamically. Oh, Allah knows best, it was a miracle.
Yeah, it's amazing that they have this expression, Allah knows best, which is like just codifying the special pleading fallacy. Whenever you don't know an answer to something, you just say Allah knows best. And I will say, in fairness, that we shouldn't expect to know everything about creation. But that's not the same thing as not having any evidence whatsoever, and just whenever anyone raises anything, automatically going right to, well, God could do it, Allah knows best, whatever you want to put it. So Brother Magdai says, we as Arabic-speaking Christians usually joke about splitting the moon because it's borrowed from a pre-Islamic poem and a famous song as well. I don't know about that particular borrowing. It certainly wouldn't surprise me. I'll have to look into that. But we do see a ton of borrowing in the Islamic sources. Not the topic of today, so we won't go into any great detail, but anything you'd like to say about that idea that Muhammad borrowed from other scriptures or other texts that were not scriptures in many cases?
I think the only response I'm going to make on that is hard to find something in Islam that wasn't borrowed from somewhere else, that doesn't have a source elsewhere. The miracle is to find something that is original in Islam.
Yeah, and actually the 90-foot...
So apart from beating your wife and justifying a 52-year-old man marrying a 6-year-old girl and having sex with her when she's 54 and she's 9, and the miracle is the Muslims believe that because the parents handed over the child for her to be married, that's why it's not rape.
Yeah, and even the 90-foot Adam actually is not original to Islam either. This idea was borrowed from Jewish legends. Okay. Rabbis came up with certain fanciful stories. Obviously I don't know their minds, but I have a feeling that they didn't really take this literally even in their fanciful stories, but regardless, they're certainly not part of scripture. So even Muhammad's ridiculous tale, he heard it and he repeated it. There's a reason that the Quran says that people were hurting his feelings by calling him the ear. He just heard random stories and he didn't take any of them critically. He just repeated them all and claimed they were revelation from God.
Yeah, there's the other one as well. You can add on to that. Don't sell your stories for a paltry price, because he was buying the stories. I was paying for them to recite these to him as well.
So getting back to our topic, we've alluded to it a couple times, but we haven't really talked about it. Villainous says, have you talked about the multiple grave sites? This idea that there are these giant graves that Islam claims are the graves of the biblical figures.
The thing is, to see, when you're talking about the Islamic 94 Adam, you really have to look at all the generations, all the way down, of human beings of that kind of size. You would find evidence everywhere of it, not just so much of the graves, but the tools, the clothing, the pots and the pans, the everyday bits and bobs you would need for everyday living. And we don't even find footprints anywhere, or handprints, because most of those human beings would have been walking down on their hands and knees trying to get at the food. We don't find anything like that. So it's not just the graves, but it's the logistics of everyday living for human beings that size. But also, you see, the Muslims can't even use the flood. Now, for those who follow the biblical narrative, there are many evidences that the atheist will try and demand of people who follow the biblical narrative, but we know we can use the flood to challenge their demands for evidence, because the flood changed the topography of the planet. So when the waters subsided from Noah's flood, to think that it went back to how it was pre-flood would be stupidly perverse or hopelessly ignorant. The global flood deluge was a mass destruction of the planet as it was, if you like, the effect of it. So to think that when the waters resided, that nothing changed, it was just stupid. The whole planet changed, the structure of the planet changed, the ecosystem has changed for one a greater or better degree. Because, well, certainly from the point of view that the canopy is not there. I mention this because you see, Muslims, they believe only in a local flood, not a global deluge. So they can't even appeal to the flood changing the topography of the planet, so they don't know where the graves are. They can't even appeal to that.
Well, I think he was referring to the claim that they actually do know where some of the graves are. I'm going to share an image here, which I just pulled up. This is apparently Adam's tomb
yeah,
here.
that's no, it's not. That's just what that is. I've done research on that, because you look how thin his shoulders would have been.
Yeah.
He would have been anorexic and bulimic at the same time. He would have gravity would have broken his spine. But the thing is, I think this is how desperate Muslims are, because that's actually graves. There's loads of people apparently buried in that. That's just a tube of graves.
Excellent. Yeah, if we were to take this claim seriously, that this is Adam's grave, that just made things a lot worse, because he seems to be a normal width, but very, very tall. So we now have this basically stick walking around.
The thing is, you see, right? If you want to prove Islam true, that would be the greatest evidence you could possibly find. Game done. Game, set, and match. Every religion is false. Everybody would mass convert to Islam. All you got to do is reveal some evidence from that. But you don't. Why do you think that is, Mr. T?
My guess is because they don't have any evidence to reveal. I've been doing this for a couple of years now. Had the channel for a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half, been participating in public discussions with Muslims for going on 3 years now. And I've asked hundreds, probably many thousands actually, of Muslims the same basic question. What is your best evidence that Islam is true? And well over 90% simply ignore the question. That they don't even bother to try to give an answer, because they have nothing to offer, or they just don't care. Maybe they have something in their mind, but they don't want it to be tested publicly. I don't know. I mean, I can't read their minds. And then of the few that do respond, I'd say more than half say Islam is true because the Trinity makes no sense, which obviously is not an argument for Islam. Whether or not the Trinity makes sense to you has no bearing whatsoever on the truth or falsity of Islam. And then there's just very, very rare Muslim that even attempts to make an argument for Islam. And if they do, it's usually, well, the Quran has this scientific foreknowledge. It talks about things that couldn't have been known at Muhammad's time, i.e., scientific miracles, which is, of course, is just utter nonsense. How about you? Have you ever heard a Muslim give any real evidence for Islam being true?
Years ago, I realized the more you studied the Bible, one conclusion came to my mind, that the Bible is the truth, therefore, by implication, everything is a lie. When Jesus said that the truth will set you free, what did he mean by that? For me, he meant the truth will set you free from lies, superstition, propaganda, and religion. So by implication, if the biblical narrative is true, then everything else is a lie. If everything else is a lie, then all you can ever do is use lies to defend it. You can't use truth to defend a lie any more than you can use a lie to defend a truth. So by implication, I've never heard anything given by a Muslim to defend Islam, because if Islam is a lie, all you can ever do is lie to defend it. They don't even know where Mecca is, or the Qibla that Muhammad changed. They don't even know where that is. This is the problem we have with Islam at the moment. They don't even know or can prove that Muhammad even existed. These are realities of Islam. And just something else, going back to Adam, you'll notice this as well, that you have all these narratives about Adam. And I sometimes think that these are deflections set up by like the demonic spirit realm that created Islam. Because what they don't mention is Adamic sin, because Islam doesn't mention Adamic sin. It does not believe in original sin. And that's quite important, because that serves, because that's one of the most important things that Jesus mentions while on earth. He was saying that, if people who need if people who are ill go to a physician, they recognize they're ill and they go to a physician. People who are not ill don't need to see a doctor. And he was making a statement that unless you are aware that you're in sin, my ransom sacrifice and my death means nothing to you unless you believe that you're a sinner. And this is the interesting thing about Islam. All of these little narratives and stories and deflections are really to draw people away from the recognition that they need to be redeemed from what Adam did. And there's no record of that in Islam. So it really perverts and bastardizes and abuses not just the events of what Adam did, but it totally denigrates, destroys, humiliates the ransom that Jesus paid when he paid life for a life for what Adam did. It totally destroys it. And that's the sad reality, because when you really start looking at the Bible, you have to address the main features of this narrative, and the narrative has been set up by the demons.
Yeah, very, very well put there. If you were going to create a false religion to undermine Christianity, I don't think you could do a better job than Islam, because what the true author of the Quran, which I would suggest was a demonic force, does
absolutely
is it takes all of the trivial things about the Bible and it says, yeah, we agree with all those things. We agree that Mary was a virgin. I'm not saying that the fact Mary was a virgin was trivial, but in comparison to the gospel message, it says we agree with that. We agree that Jesus worked miracles. We agree with all kinds of things about Jesus. We believe in all the same prophets. Of course, that's not really true, but the claim is there. The only thing that you got to get over is you got to get over this idea that Jesus was divine, that he died on the cross, that he rose from the dead, and forgiveness of your sins, and that's the core of the gospel message. So, it's perfectly set up to support as much relatively unimportant stuff as possible and deny the core message, which I think is exactly how to make a religion that is appealing to some, but is utterly false.
Because it appeals on emotion, not logic. That's why Islam works. It appeals on those frailties and emotions that are sort of part of inherited sin from Adam, and that is emotional weakness sometimes. That's why anger is so easy and love is hard. It takes effort to be loving, kind, and patient and such. Those require effort. But to be angry, frustrated, and impatient, they're easy. And Islam feeds on that. It thrives on those negative emotions. That's why it works so well. Because that's why You find people willing to be violent for it, because when you've got a religion that justifies your emotions to be negative and hateful and spiteful and angry, Islam is perfect for you. And the demons know that. That's why the religion exists the way that it does. And another thing that people need to think of is that the demons have been at this since the fall of Adam. They know human psychology better than we can ever possibly imagine. That's why the world is the way that the world is. You've only got to look at, say, evolution, the most obnoxious, contemptible, vile, despicable doctrine you can ever imagine. It works on the same level as Islam, whereas Islam it works on emotion. Islam works on the pseudo-scientific claptrap of logic, because people flatter their ego with accepting things. Oh yeah, it makes intellectual sense. You're being intellectually dishonest when you accept intelligent design. I find Islam and evolution being the mirror image of each other. I don't know what the word is in chemicals, where you have a mirror opposite of each other, but the gloves don't fit. You can't take the glove of one and fit it on the other. But chemicals have total opposites, like hands. Right? Islam is like the mirror image of evolution, and they both operate in similar ways. Even the arguments, both of them, funny enough, you mentioned it's science there. Islam appeals to science. Well, guess what? Doesn't evolution do that? Right? Islam will mock certain things about, like, what Christians believe or what the Bible teaches. It will mock it. When you look at what it believes, you really have to ask serious questions. And evolution does exactly the same thing. They'll mock, say, the virgin birth. But then they believe everybody, the rocks, stones that got rained on by water, gave birth to cells that gave birth to virgins, that gave birth. I'm talking about one miracle where a woman got pregnant by, like, divine power. One, you believe every woman got pregnant by water raining on a rock that formed chemicals that sooner or later became amphibians, then became, reptiles, birds and mammals, then became apes, squirrels, because they missed that image out of their lovely silhouette of the ascent of man. Squirrels that became apes that became men. And you're telling me I should believe that? Have a word with yourself. I'd love to do atheism. I'm actually stronger on atheism than I am Islam. That's because I think, in certain parts of the planet, Islam has this stronghold where it's a real threat. But in the Western world, it's atheism and evolution. It has an equal footing, as it were, in the minds and hearts of people. That, funnily enough, both of them are fighting for the minds and hearts of people who follow the biblical narrative.
Excellent. So Steve says that they are chemical optical isomers. So I think that is what you're referring to, or two things are directly opposite.
I'm glad there's a budding scientist sitting there giving us the words that we need. You're right, Steve. That's the word I was looking for.
Or possibly, Kale said, anatomer is the term for mirror image molecule. So, but I think it was the first one. I think that it was the chemical optical isomers that you were referring to.
I think I need to watch an episode of Breaking Bad and brush up on my science.
Yes. So I've had this image up on the screen for a while because I didn't realize we'd go on that tangent, but that's all right. I do want to say one quick thing about atheism. And we definitely can do a show on that at some point. But I would just say that, atheists often say that religious people, which basically means Christians, because let's face it, the typical atheist doesn't know anything except for Christianity, since they usually are in the West, that they are only religious because it gives them emotional satisfaction or this emotional appeal of religion. And well, first of all, even if you do get emotional benefit from something, that doesn't make it false. But then at the same time, they ignore that. I found at least the type of atheists that talk publicly about atheism, there's plenty of people who are atheists by I don't think about these things, I don't care about these things types. But the people who are vocal about their atheism, they get a very strong emotional benefit out of it too. They get to think of themselves intellectually superior to other people. So I think it's just a complete non-starter. So this image on the...
So just on the atheism thing, I often say to an atheist, what is the evolutionary reason why you spend your time arguing with people who believe in God? If I believe in God and let's just say, for instance, your evolution is true, I only evolved to believe in God because evolution developed within me a genetic pattern for me to believe in something that's 180 degrees diametrically opposed to what evolution is. For whatever reason, I don't know how that abstract concept came about in evolution, but that's what I believe because that's what I evolved to do. What's your evolutionary reason for you to argue with me? You've got more days behind you than ahead of you. You're going to die very soon, and then you're going to die and never exist forever. So why are you standing here wasting these 5, 10, 20 minutes trolling me on the internet or arguing with people that believe in God? Shouldn't you be going out and doing some drugs? Maybe having sex with animals, or having sex with your same kind, or doing something that because when you're dead, you're dead. You're wasting your life away, and when you're dead, you're gone forever, baby. I never understood that. What is the evolutionary reason for you to stand there and argue with me? Because I believe in intelligent design. Right, this image. Right, the reason why I downloaded that image was because even though I can't testify as to whether there actually was a crane holding up this piece of clothing as some kind of, if you like, representation of Adam or whatever it was, the reason why I thought it was an interesting image is because the Islamic narrative has human beings wearing clothes. It doesn't talk about Allah providing clothes for Cain, Abel, or subsequent generations that came afterwards. So the questions have to be asked. It gives you kind of an idea of what kind of materials, the logistics of getting those materials, the logistics of creating clothing like the sewing and things like that, the looms and whatnot. And also, clothing of that size, we should have evidence somewhere through archaeological dig sites of them actually existing. Not just of the clothing, but the logistics of getting the materials to make the clothing.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'll just, we've mentioned this several times, but there are all kinds of evidence that we'd expect if people, if there's just one 90-foot person and every other person before or since has been 6 feet tall, maybe we wouldn't have any evidence for that. But if we take the Islamic claim seriously, there should be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people who are substantially taller than 10 feet. We should find numerous kinds of evidence. We should find bones. We have none of those. We should find housing structures. No. You talked about tools. We have lots and lots of tools from prehistoric time. They all seem to be of normal proportions. Clothing, we have clothing from prehistoric times from archaeological sites. We see none of this. We see no evidence whatsoever that there was any human beings that were substantially taller than current height.
I think that if Muslims want to turn around and say that Cain and Adam and Eve were of that stature, but then they gave birth to, say, 50 foot tall or 10 foot tall or something like that, you'd have to ask other questions. Then how did human beings, how did they sort of recognize and react that the human being that they gave birth to or fathered or mothered was significantly shorter than what they were? And then the logistics of, say, for instance, how would Eve feed a child that small? There are so many other factors that you'd have to factor in, because would the baby's mouth be big enough to be fed by Eve's breasts?
Yeah, and of course it would also deny the hadith there that people have been getting progressively shorter ever since. That seems to suggest that Muhammad thought that people who lived 2 generations before him were substantially taller than him. And, we're now, 20 generations removed from Adam or whatever number, depending on how you define a generation. From Muhammad, I meant to say. So we should be substantially shorter than Muhammad was. And pretty soon human beings should just be 1 foot tall or something.
It should really resemble something like Gulliver's Travels, where we were 90 foot and now we're about the size of a thumbnail.
So I guess Avoicein The Dark was still around because he just recently asked, do you have a channel? And then he hasn't been unable to find it, apparently.
It's called Thunderous One. Thunderous separate word one. I upload Islamic content on there. I have not done any of my own material. I tend to get invited on shows, and some shows I like to go on, like this particular channel here. Others I don't, because they're atheist, and I'm not able to, how can I say, respond the way I like to respond. Because if you're going to attack Islam, you have to, you can only, for me, my point of view is you can only attack Islam using the biblical narrative to do it. If you've worked with money, if anybody's worked in an environment where dealing with cash transactions on a daily basis, they'll tell you, in order to understand counterfeit money, you don't sit there studying counterfeit money all day. What you do is study real money, then counterfeit money, boom, you'll tell it straight away. That's how you look at it. So when you look at the Bible, even Solomon says something very similar in Ecclesiastes, I think it's 12:12, where he says, to the reading of many books much time and devotion has been given them, and it's wearisome to the soul. I paraphrase, but words to that effect. And in fact, what he's saying is, you can devote a lot of time to reading Islam, this, that, and the other. And to be honest with you, you could probably break those arguments down like we've done tonight, just by reading the Bible. So not only does reading the Bible strengthen your own faith in the God of the Bible and the narrative, particularly now where we need to have that faith more than ever before because of the way that the world is now, but also if you absorb it properly, when you come across arguments like Islam or atheism, so you just tear it down instantly. You don't really sometimes need to go into those in deep, though it's handy to do that. Some people can do that. I'm not challenging, because I've learned a lot, even from people that come on this channel that do that. But sometimes with the greater majority of human beings, it's also good to use the Bible to do it as well.
Excellent. And I'll go ahead and put a link to the Thunderous One's channel. Again, he doesn't upload original content on that channel, but I will put a link to that. Anon, go ahead.
No, so nothing.
So Anon Mouse Apologetics said, don't forget all the ridiculous stories of Dul Qarnayn. And that is a very timely comment. You want to tell us about what you are working on?
I've been working on for a little while at the moment. The narrative in the Quran about Dul Qarnayn. It is my favorite go-to. I've got two favorite go-tos when you're talking about Islam. You can't argue with a Muslim on history, on science, because if to them, they've got their mind already made up that the science in the Quran is real, even to the point of, for instance, embryology, which has been disproven so many times. They'll use rhetorical devices and the such to try and defend the sciences of the Quran, the numerology in the Quran, the morality of the Quran. What the Islam cannot do is defend the Quran historically. The death of Jesus is a fantastic example. The greatest event in history that we've got probably the most amount of evidence for is the death of Jesus, which the Quran incidentally denies. That's a historical fact. So there's one thing. Dul Qarnayn is another. Dul Qarnayn, the whole story around that is a fantastic example of Muslims. You've got no choice but to try and answer this using history. History does not lie. You can interpret all the other things in Islam using rhetorical devices, and you have to understand the Arabic. You've got to go back to the Arabic and understand. Then you've got to understand classical Arabic. Do you know all those arguments that they present forward? But you can't do that with history. So Dul Qarnayn's coming up.
Excellent. And I would also like people to encourage people to check out Anon Mouse's channel. I plan to post a notice for that on my community page at some point. I was going to do it like a month ago, and then I took some time off and I forgot about it. But I recently was introduced to his channel, and he's just getting started, but I think the content is pretty good, so check that out as well. Avoicein The Dark asked if I would post a link to your channel, and yes, I will post a link to the Thunderous One's channel after we get off. I didn't think to do that before.
You see, I've said to yourself, Thaddeus, I would love to do content with someone. It's very difficult to find someone to do content with that wants to come from, say, the biblical narrative. There are many people that want to do material about Islam, and that's great. That works for those people. But I want to use the Bible to discredit Islam or atheism. I don't want to use, say, if you like, because that's all been done by other people, and I don't want to repeat. I want to do something original and different, like tonight, using the Bible, understanding the spiritual dimension from the physical dimension. It does not work with Islam, because that's not the way that the Bible presents itself. The spiritual dimension is a separate, different area where God and the angels live. We live in this realm, and this is where we were designed to live. So to apply physical attributes to the spiritual dimension, which is what Islam does, is totally obtuse.
Excellent. So Villainous pointed out that atheists spend 99% of their time attacking Christianities and other religions get a pass. Why is that? And I'll go first on this one. I would suggest, well, there's two reasons. One is that, atheism as we know it is predominantly found in Christian majority countries. So one aspect is that Christianity is the natural foil there because it's the most popular religion. But then I think there's definitely another aspect, and we also should keep in mind that global atheism isn't really what we think of as atheism, because actually the majority of the world's atheists live in China, and they have very different reasons for being atheists. You don't find them posting YouTube videos for obvious reasons, but they have very different reasons. So we shouldn't just lump everyone who is an atheist into that category. But as far as vocal ones, that's one reason. But I think the other reason is that they have a need to attack Christianity because at some deep level they understand that they're rebelling against God, not a conscious level by any means, but they understand. There's this saying that atheists spend all their time being mad at God for not existing. And that's kind of exactly what it is, that they're very angry with God at some level, and that is why they lash out and say he doesn't exist. And of course, attacking, say, Hinduism wouldn't have the same appeal because it's a very different system. It doesn't give you that ability to attack this creator figure of the universe, the person the being responsible for your existence. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think when you look at atheism, if people accept the biblical narrative as reality, and where Jesus says truth sets you free, he sets you free from lies, superstition, propaganda, and religion. Atheism is propaganda. Pure 100% propaganda based on pseudoscientific claptrap, because atheism is predicated by at least 97% of people who are actually evolutionists. So actually they're not atheists, because atheism doesn't exist if your mindset is everything came from nothing and nothing did everything. So there's no such thing as atheism. You're an evolutionist. When you look at atheism, it works in the West because this is where the bulk of Christianity is. And when you really analyze atheism, it allows all those other philosophies and things to ride in on it. For instance, and atheism is a direct attack on the Bible, because if you believe the biblical narrative, then you know that the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one. So who's actually truly behind atheism? You've got to say the demons are behind it. Satan and the demons, they're the ones running the planet. If you can make people believe that everything came from nothing and nothing came from everything, and there was a load of water that went on a rock, and out that rock there was a goo, and in that goo there came a cell, and out that cell it suddenly decided to replicate. Then it went to become a trilobite. Then the trilobite became a fish. Then the fish became an amphibian. Then the amphibian became a reptile, and the reptile became a bird. It became a mammal, and it became further reptiles as well. Oh, and let's not mention all the vegetation on the planet that somehow got there to be there as well, in male and female form. And then some mammals decided to go back into the sea and become whales and dolphins and things, right? If that is what you believe, right, you have to ask the question. The demons are having a laugh at this. The demons are laughing and looking at God. Proverbs 27 verse 11, be wise, my son, make my heart rejoice, while I can make a reply to him that's taunting me. Look at how the demons are making them believe. So when you look at atheism today, it's nothing more than the doctrine of demons, clearly. But what it allows things to do, it allows to undermine the Bible at every possible level. This is why I wanted to do several shows on atheism, and I'll give an example now. With atheism, which seems curiously silent on things like gender non-binary, gender neutral, gender fluid, this whole movement where actually if you put male or female on the birth certificate, it is a form of oppression. It's a form of abuse because you're assigning a gender predicated on whether the child has a penis or a vagina. So you assign a gender on that. That's simple 101 biology that you do that. If it's got a penis on it, you call it a boy or a sire. Right? If it's got a vagina, you call it a female or a bitch. It's simple as biology 101. Evolution and this new movement is allowing you to undermine something very interesting that not many people have picked upon. Because the Bible says he who created them in the beginning created them male and female. So who do you think is being attacked here with this cultural Marxism, which is riding in on atheism? It's a direct attack on the Bible. Marriage, I'll give another one, right? Because I don't want to ruin all the things I've picked up. Marriage is something that God ordained. He ordained it right from the very beginning when he created Eve. There was Mr. Universe, Adam. Along comes Miss World, Eve, and God creates them and institutes marriage. Jesus confirmed that. Marriage is a God-made institution. It is ordained by God. And yet now people say marriage oppresses women. People shouldn't get married, or they're bastardizing marriage by saying 2 women can get married and 2 men can get married, totally humiliating the whole concept of marriage and what marriage is all about. You can have prenuptial marriages now. Do you see what I mean? So the whole, and this is all coming in via atheism and inclusion and cultural Marxism. So this is why this whole thing is taken so big in the West at the minute. The demons are using it to undermine every facet of the Christian identity, and why atheism attacks Christianity more than any others, because all those other religions are in Satan's hand anyway. Why would he use atheism to attack Hinduism? Both of them are in his hand. Why is he going to use atheism to attack Islam? If he's got atheism in one hand and Islam in the other hand, it's not a problem for him. They're still misled. The Bible is the tool that he's attacking. That's my answer.
Excellent. It's a good preview of content we may do in future weeks. It sounds like it will be quite entertaining, so I hope that people will be on the lookout for that. I want to read a couple comments along this line from the audience, and then I want to take one more comment from Avoicein The Dark to get back to our original subject and kind of tie everything together. So Veronika said that atheism attacks Christianity because Christianity is the only religion which is a challenge. All others are obviously false. I would agree with that. Steve said that atheists only consider Christianity the serious threat is the only religion that demands real eternal change. And that's true as well, that every other religion, whether it be Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever, it's kind of all about make yourself a better person by being trying harder. Only Christianity makes you acknowledge the fact that you can never be good enough in the eyes of God. Only Christianity really brings you into alignment with God's will. And
just on that, can I just say, what did the Apostle Paul say about that? He goes, change your personality and put on the new personality that was made for you in the image of God, in the image of Christ. I think something like that. I mean, it just came to my mind. So it demands that you change your real personality, to put away the old personality.
Excellent. And then Villainous answered his own comment by saying that he thinks that atheists are annoyed that Christianity stands up to the truth. And I would agree. You know, Christianity has been under constant academic attack for the last 200 years. When these attacks first made public light, it was a major problem for the church because we didn't have answers for these things. We'd never faced these questions before. But Christianity has stood the test of time. We now, because of these academic type attacks on the legitimacy of the Bible, we now have abundant evidence that the Bible stands up to historical scrutiny. We cannot say the same thing for Islam or any other religion. Academic criticism of Islam is kind of in its infancy, and we already see that seems to be creating all kinds of questions that Islam has no answer to, other than to just throw your hands up in the air and say, Allah knows best. So here is the comment that from A Voice in the Dark on the Adam issue. It will be another example of his special pleading that he has come up with. And this one's going to directly contradict the Islamic narrative. He says, how does anyone know that perhaps the size of man changed when God expelled Adam from heaven, because we know that God had created this planet for us, all mankind? So he now seems to be suggesting that Adam was only 90 foot tall in heaven, and when he was kicked out of heaven, he became 6 feet tall or 5 feet tall or whatever.
Right. For two things on that. First of all, it says they were diminishing. That's progressive. So the Hadith clearly states they're diminishing. Second thing, why would you be 90 foot in heaven and 6 foot on earth? What's the point? Why the change in size? That wouldn't even be relative to mention. And the interesting thing is, he says that the earth was created for mankind, but the Quran doesn't say that. The earth was created before mankind, because if you listen to Yasakadi's two discussions, and they're actually on my channel about the jinn, and they were on earth and they can have children. This is Yasakadi, Dr. Yasakadi, one of your most preeminent scholars, says jinn are able to have children, eat physical food, urinate, because you've got Satan urinating in people's ears and such things. It's in your Hadith. And they're on earth before humans are. Humans only came to earth after they did something wrong in Islamic heaven. So if they never did anything wrong in Islamic heaven, they'd still be in heaven.
Yeah.
So what was the point? So what's the point of the earth being created? So that is yet again you're arguing a case without actually understanding your own religion.
Yeah, and of course he's also ignoring the Hadith that explicitly say that Adam was created as a clay statue and was made standing there for an extended period until God breathed life into him. So
is
apparently,
that the one where somebody went into the nose of that clay model and came out the anus?
Yes, that would be Iblis or the devil and proved that he was hollow, whereas the actual Allah is solid. So he made that suggestion, and then that Adam could have been tall in heaven and whatnot. And then as soon as we address it, he says, I am not suggesting that. I was asking if it's possible. So make up your mind, pick a position and defend it. Don't just keep saying, well, this is possible, that's possible. Well, good. Anything's possible. It's possible that Islam is false. Would you accept that as an argument that Islam is false? It's possible that Muhammad was the most perverted man to ever live. We actually have evidence to back to that proposition, but I'm guessing you're not going to say that just suggesting that it's possible that Adam was depraved is sufficient evidence that he was depraved. So if you're going to suggest that it's possible that Adam was created 90 feet tall and then kicked out of heaven and changed to 6 feet tall and he came to earth, sure, it's a logical possibility. It contradicts the Hadith. It contradicts the teachings of Islam. It contradicts the traditional understanding of Islam. But sure, it's a logical possibility. It doesn't solve any of the problems, though. It doesn't explain why heaven is physical, why paradise is physical. It doesn't explain why he was 90 foot tall there and 6 feet tall now. Just suggesting something is possible is not an explanation.
I think I'd like to add on that as well, that when Adam was in heaven, Islamic heaven, he could see the angels and he could see the jinn and such. What I'd like to know is when we come to the physical realm in Islamic parlance, right, and the jinn are always have been on earth even before Adam was, so Adam and Eve get expelled from heaven to earth. Why is it we've lost the ability to see jinns and angels? Adam
Good
could.
point. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many flaws in this suggestion. I think that this is a good comment to kind of close it out. We've been going a little over 2 hours, so we'll be wrapping it up here shortly. If you do have any questions relevant to today's topic, go ahead and put those in the chat. We'll be happy to address them. We're not in a hurry. But I think that this comment kind of just sums up what we've seen from Avoicein The Dark. And actually, I'd like to thank him for at least trying. You know, two other Muslims came in the chat. All they wanted to do was try to distract by talking about Christianity and name calling. As soon as they realized that wouldn't work, they left. But I do want to thank Avoicein The Dark for at least being here and at least pushing back and talking to us. But I think that this comment really sums up what we've seen, that he has now proposed a new unprovable claim to justify previous unprovable claims. And that's what kind of the situation is. We have a claim of Islam. We have a claim that Adam was 90 feet tall and that people have been getting progressively shorter. We don't have any evidence to back that claim. And to escape this, Avoicein The Dark or any other Muslim, all they can do is come up with other unprovable ideas or special pleading fallacies and say, well, you know, it's possible that X happened. It's possible that Y happened. God can do anything, so you can't prove him wrong. And I don't think that's the position you want to be in, because that's the same thing that you could say about absolutely any idea whatsoever. That's the same thing a flat earther can say. They can say, well, you know, it could be that all that photographic evidence is faked. It's logically possible that there's this vast conspiracy that every scientist in the world is in on, that is lying to us that the earth is actually flat. That's exactly what a flat earther would say. And from my perspective, your position about Islam is exactly identical. You look at all the evidence and you say, well, you know, that evidence doesn't mean anything because God can do whatever he wants. God can do anything. I don't have anything to support my ideas, but you can't prove them wrong because God can do anything. Any closing thoughts from you?
No, I'd agree with your comments there. Absolutely.
All right, I'll give just a few seconds in case anyone wants to put anything in the chat that they want us to address. But if not, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I think we had a great chat. I think it was really productive. I hope that, you know, you take this material, either if you already knew about the 90-foot atom and you just kind of thought it was a joke, or you didn't know about it. I hope that you take it and you kind of look at what the real problem behind it is. The real problem isn't so much that it's ridiculous or that Muhammad stole this idea from pre-existing literature, but that it betrays the total lack of understanding of the nature of God, that everything in Islam is taken hyper literally, that God is a very physical being, that everything is very physical, that heaven is very physical, and that combined with the fact that there's no evidence for it. And I think you just see that there are a lot of questions Islam cannot answer except to throw its hands up in the air and say, Allah knows best. So I don't see anything from the chat. Thanks for joining us. Again, I'll put a link to the Thunderous One's channel in the description box. Stay tuned for an announcement. I'll do another stream with him again in the future. It won't be like, you know, next week or something, but look for that in, you know, 3 weeks, a month, whatever, when he's ready to do another presentation. On my own end, I am trying to work out having a live stream with Lloyd de Jong. We will be talking about Yasser Qadi and how his views on abrogation really explain a lot about Islam, how we as non-Muslims often misunderstand abrogation intentionally because the Muslim apologists distort it, they misuse it, they abuse it to cause confusion, which is, of course, what Muslim apologists always do. But when we really dig into the doctrine of abrogation, it may be even worse than you already realize. Haven't finalized the time on that, but that should be sometime this week on my channel. And then one final announcement on Christmas Eve at probably at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So that would be 2 p.m. GMT. I will be having a live stream to celebrate Christmas. I don't know about anyone else's, but my home church is currently reclosed down to coronavirus concerns, and I just thought it would be good to get together and celebrate the birth of Christ as a Christian community. So stay tuned for that as well. Any last words from you?
No, it's been a pleasure to be on the show again. I'm grateful that I'm able to come on and have a chat with yourself, have an enjoyable discussion about another feature of Islam that does not make sense, that many people probably weren't aware of. That includes Muslims as well, and how applying an understanding of the Bible and entry-level biology can, be used in a polemic way against a religion that is diametrically opposed to what the Bible teaches.
Excellent. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.
Bye, everyone.